Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Aloha everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and our guest today is Mary-Rodwell. And Mary-Rodwell is an RN, is founder and principal of Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, which is ACERN. And she was born in the United Kingdom and eventually migrated to Western Australia in 1991. Excuse me. And she currently resides in Queensland. She's a former nurse, midwife, and health educator, and was employed as a professional counselor for the National Health Service in UK and Australian counselling agencies Silver Chain and Centre Care. Since 1994, Mary has worked in private practice as a professional counselor, hypnotherapist, metaphysical teacher, researcher, author, Reiki master, and international speaker. And she's recognized internationally as one of Australia's leading researchers in the UFO and Contact phenomenon. She is the author of Awakening: How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life, and producer of EBE award-winning documentaries Expressions of ET Contact, A Visual Blueprint, and Expressions of ET Contact, A Communication and Healing Blueprint. So she's lectured all over the world: Hong Kong, USA, Canada, Hawaii, UK, Ireland, France, Malta, New Zealand, and she's appeared on many shows and documentaries, including Oz Files, My Mom Talks to Aliens, and her book, Awakening: How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life, was republished in 2010, and the late Dr. Roger Leir was quoted as saying, "In my opinion, this book will become the Bible of the alien abduction phenomenon." She currently is, she's very dedicated to the subject and is unwavering, and her passion has driven her to become the director and chair of the Experiencer Support Programs of Dr. Edgar Mitchell, which is the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, known as FREE, F-R-E-E, and she's an advisory, which is an advisory committee of exopolitics, and she's the organizer of the first international conference, Hidden Truths, in Perth, Australia, Western Australia. So this a little bit about the phenomenon, then we'll have Dr. Lesson say a few words, and then we'll bring in Mary. Research from over 3,000 cases suggests that this is a global phenomenon. The star children exhibit a maturity and wisdom beyond their years, an awareness and connection to spiritual realms. Indigos, or crystal children as they are often labeled, have telepathic abilities, are spiritually awakened, describing many species of non-human visitors with a feeling that they are as real to them as their real family because they feel supported by them. This research also explores evidence from a scientific, biological, psychological, and anthropological, spiritual, and historical perspective to support what Mary believes is a genetic engineering program for upgrading Homo sapiens, leading to a new paradigm shift in human consciousness, and data suggests children are being altered and transformed on many levels through extraterrestrial encounters. And there's more on Mary on her website. I have right now, Mary's site is down, so I have a lot of her information up on aquarianradio.com. I have a page dedicated to Mary and her work, and she has a new book called The New Human, which we will talk about in this show. Sasha, Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring on Mary?
Okay, I think this is a really, really important program, because it's about breaking down the dichotomy between self and other. And the extraterrestrial, I would probably say the extraordinary experiences that people dismiss have a common theme. And the theme that runs through all of them is the ability to supersede our concepts of ourself and to still have those, but to have them nestled in ever larger context so that self and other dissolves and we can feel our spiritual connection to everyone and everything. So I think that's what's behind the ET phenomenon, the contact, and I think Mary's going to teach us a lot about that today.
And welcome to the show, Mary Rodwell. Thank you for joining us from down under.
It's an absolute pleasure again, Janet, to talk to both you and Sasha on this subject, which I know is a passion for both of you as well, doing the wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, we are very passionate about this research. I am an experiencer, and Dr. Lesson's been working with experiencers for many, many years. And so you are one of the leaders in this field, and we're getting interference again. So not sure if, Sean, we could maybe switch. This happens all the time. But go ahead and speak, and I will text Sean. Yep, it's getting louder. Okay, Sean, maybe you could call our cell phone. That's our producer. Oh well. Go ahead, Mary. I'll get him to make another connection.
Right.
Tell us about
Isn't it interesting how, there are forces out there that seem to do their very best to try and stop us speaking the truths that we all need to hear. And I think we just have to plow through because this is part of the deal, as it were. And I know you understand. And this is the important thing with ufology, is that for many, many years, it has focused primarily on the scientific side of experiences in ways of proving that this is a reality, the nuts and bolts, as we call it. And I understand that, and I think it's been very important. But what has been missing is an acknowledgement and acceptance that evidence also comes from the testimony of the multidimensional side of this experience, which, has always been why I've been so fascinated as a therapist and someone who has been seeking in terms of my spiritual journey, and those that come to me, finally trying to understand this from a soul journey. And this is why, I'm really excited about some of the latest research, not only through ACERN, where I've always believed it was the encounter was a modern day shamanic wake-up call. And what we're covering now is all the things that have not been acceptable to look at with many of those in the field, which is, taking into account out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, time distortions, healing, and the healing abilities that those with experiences have. Altered and enhanced senses, for example, heightened multidimensional senses such as telepathy, clairvoyance, past life recall, and transformative changes that are all also evidenced by the strange scripts and star languages and artwork. And recently I've come across more and more bringing these frequencies through in music, and I've got a really fascinating case to tell you about that's only surfaced recently with an 11-year-old boy that has the understanding that the music that he's bringing in at the moment is from the ETs, and he actually knows that he is channeling this music and how he understands it. And I can give you a little bit of an understanding of what that is that he's experiencing and how he experiences and interprets it.
Wow.
Well, go ahead if you want to start with that.
Do you have some of that music?
I have, although I can't play it for you at the moment. I need the permission of. We're calling him Arthur, which is the name he's chosen. He lives in Western Australia, and the mother wrote to me and said that he's diagnosed as ADD Asperger's, and I can go into more of the new programs where we understand, and I believe now that these are all new programs to take us out of the 3D world and expose us or our new generations into the multidimensional reality that actually exists out there. She said he's not like other children. He sees colored orbs and senses very strongly. He's scared to be in his own even during the day, but not as much at night. And she said when he sits at the piano, he doesn't figure out the song. He just says to his mum, "You have to bring the video camera now. He doesn't read music by notes. He's been playing by ear since he was 7. He taught himself. And these pieces that he's been coming out with, we call quirky pieces, but I don't know. So I had a conversation with him, and I said, what do you feel when you want to create the music? And he said to me, it's like something wants to bring something out of me, like someone is putting something into me and is trying to bring it out to show the world what I can do. I know I'm not doing it myself. It feels like someone is bringing it into me, bringing it out and making my fingers move. And I asked him, did it feel like another energy or consciousness assisting him? And he said, yes. And what do you feel about this consciousness? And he said, I feel like I'm playing a piano track, but I don't feel like I'm doing it, but I don't know where it's coming from. And interestingly, later, he said to me, when he plays those pieces, he said, like this other energy is taking over. And he said, it's like my hands are doing it all by myself. And he also said, when I play with this energy, my hands, he says, normally when I play for 3 minutes, my hands cramp up. But when I'm doing it with this energy, I can do it at speed for over 12 minutes, and I don't feel any pain at all. So he's very aware. And when we talked about it, she said also when he's finished a piece, he's done 6 of them now, she said, he said to me, I feel drowsy and I feel like I'm going to pass out. And the mother said that when he did 5 over 3 days, he literally crashed for a full day, lay on the couch and couldn't do very much. Like he was just completely and utterly drained afterwards. And later when we continued to talk about it, we talked about what he felt about the being or the assistance he was getting from this being. And it was the beings that he remembers going up onto the spacecraft that he said were the good beings, the nice ones. And he explained, he did a picture of the nice ones. And what was absolutely fascinating was the names that he knew of these particular pieces. And his track 1, which he called, he felt was very conflicted, was to do with decoding, track 2 was decoding human DNA. The 3rd track was learning. The 4th one was on a meditation. The 5th one was going within yourself. And the track 6 was arrival. So he had the names of them. He knew what they were to be called. And the very 2nd track, decoding the human DNA, he remembers the frequency of when he went up on the craft. And when he was on the craft, they were fixing him and they were playing this frequency. And the reason he said they were fixing him was 2 nights before, he'd been taken up onto the craft by other beings, which he said were not nice. He said they pretended to be blue beings, but he said they weren't. He said, I felt they were reptilian, and he remembers them putting something in his eye and in his gut. And he then told me 2 days later, these other nice beings came and picked him up and fixed him with these frequencies that one of them he was playing as his track 2. Now, wow. Fascinating, isn't it?
Yes. Let me pause right there for a moment. Can you let's go into this, because I've been working with a lot of experiencers, and I've actually been getting a little bit more of my story. The reptilians always get the bad rap. Are you finding out that reptilians are all bad, all good, no. A mixed bag? What's going on with the reptilians, and what are these factions? And now the blue beings have entered well, they've always been around because we have like Krishna back in India and stuff like that, but they've resurfaced now into the ET lore. Who are these blue beings? Are they the blue avions that Corey Good talks about, or are they something else?
I think these ones are from Arcturus, I think, but some blue ones I think are also Pleiadian. What's interesting was he saw an image of a blue. I've got a little sculpture of a blue being that I was given many years ago, and he could see that via Skype. And he said they pretended to be that, he said, but I knew they weren't. He was very aware that he was being conned, which is very interesting for an 11-year-old to be able to tell the difference. But I do agree with you. I do think that, reptilians are generally given a bad rap, and I don't believe all of them are deserving of that, for sure. And, because I've met many people who have said that they're reptilian human hybrids, and they have been delightful people. Many of them are interested in healing, and they feel very connected to their reptilian selves and don't have any problem with, articulating this as well and saying, I actually feel more comfortable in my reptilian form. I want to help the planet. I am here that's part of my mission. And so my sense is that there are, like there are with humans, there are those that are more self-serving than others. And there are those that, like ourselves, want to evolve and are, even though they're in a form that's more confronting to humans. I know that Barbara Lamb's had very loving encounters with them, and I know many other people that have experienced very loving encounters with the reptilians, and that's not ones that have said they're hybrids necessarily. These are individuals like you have come across as well, Janet, that have said that they felt that they were very loving, very caring, and felt very supported by them. So I do think we have to be very careful about our judgments about the different forms of beings. And one of my ways of dealing with that is to ask the individual what they sense rather than what they're looking at as an image, but what do they sense energetically from that being rather than making a judgment of the form that they're presented with.
So I have a question. What's going on with the factions? Are there two? Are there more factions? Are we in some kind of war? We see people are doing the night vision goggles and they say there's a space war. Do we have a secret space program? Do you have any inkling of what's going on? Because you've been researching thousands of cases. Is this a violent universe, or is it peaceful, or where is it? What's going on?
Oh, that's a big one, Janet. I am probably even more confused than I've ever been, to be honest, with you now. But what I will say is that I do give a great deal of veracity to the children's understanding, primarily for two reasons. One, they don't watch talk shows. Two, they don't read books on this. So I do feel there's an integrity within their information. Interestingly, I spoke to a 16-year-old starseed who told me when I said, what's it like out there? Because he remembered his life on Mars. He remembered that he used to make interstellar craft. But I said to him, what's going on out there in the cosmos? And is it a bit like Star Trek? Oh no, he said, it's more like Star Wars.
Oh no.
So that was his understanding. So look, this is a hard one because we get both polarities, don't we? We get those like Dr. Greer who think, or is saying at least the interstellar ones are all benevolent. Whether, and maybe with the reptilians and some of the greys, because some of them are earthbound, they're the ones that perhaps have their own self-serving agendas. But, it is very, very hard to work out, other than I do know from some of the children, they know they've been manipulated by human MyLab. And what was fascinating was a 9-year-old who told me he was from Orion. He used to work on advanced technologies, such as time travel. He told me he'd come to this planet as a light physicist, and his problem was with scientists here, where he said many of them have not the understanding to understand my awareness of physics. He said, other than Tesla. But what he did tell me was when he only a short time ago, he was taken to an underground base. He was sitting in a chair with a woman in black, which he said was like a uniform, and she had technology by her. And he said, and I knew what she was doing. She was trying to use the technology to lower my frequency so she could put things into my head and also take out information. And I had to keep my vibration higher, my frequency higher, so she couldn't do it. She managed occasionally, but most of the time I kept my frequency higher, and she didn't know that. So he was very aware. Wow. He said, that was quite fascinating, because when I spoke with him, he asked to speak to me. I was speaking to his father, who's an experiencer, very aware gentleman. And he said, can I speak to Mary? And I said, so what is it you want to say? Why is it you want to speak to me? And he said, well, it's because of your frequency. So then I said, okay, now what is it? And he told me that there is technology on the moon, on Mars, and on Orion that is technology for mind control, including, he said, it's not just it's biological as well as having a certain amount of electronics, if you like, as well. So it's a combination of both technology and biology. And he's aware that these are all affecting humans. And he said that, that a lot of kids like him get brought into the programs, these covert programs that they hold in underground bases. And I've met many of those that have remembered as children going to these underground bases and being taught things. And he said, it's hard for me because in my school, they don't understand me at all. Even those very aware children, he said, don't get where I'm coming from. He said, the only ones that really understand, he said, are the military that have these schools. But he said it's all for their own power and for controlling. He said, and that's the sad thing, that there's not those that are have the facilities that and information that they have that could do, offer the schools that we need, which allow us to share our knowledge and to share our understanding. He said, and we need those kinds of schools where we can teach you what we know. He said some interesting things about going to sacred sites, like Chichen Itza, for example. And he said, and when I go to places like that, that triggers more information for me. So I go for the frequency, and I go because it opens up more information that I can share. And this was a very interesting thing to hear from him, and why, the sacred sites are so important to these children as well.
Wow.
Sash, do you have a question?
No, I'm just in awe. Of course, that's the same thing that Freddie Silva's been saying all along, that meditating in a sacred site, especially with other people, just makes a coherent field that brings in the contact that you're seeking. You can actually direct it.
Okay, we're getting more interference. Come on, guys, cut us a break. What I get from this is that there appears to be like the factions, and so the MyLabs is the human faction that's coming in. They have some agenda for this program, and I've heard, I interviewed Keith Andrews, and he was on a facility at a young age. They are taking children. I'm going to text Sean to see if he can.
Yeah, we've been talking to Monique Lasson, who's been rescuing children that have been abducted by not just the military, but part of the CIA has been procuring children for terrible things, for sacrifice and for mind control, to do absolutely horrible assassinations and things like that. And so this is a huge, awful, dangerous thing. It's different than the consciousness expanding experiences that most people have.
I was certainly hoping that the universe is more like Star Trek than Star Wars, but we're getting a lot of reports of the negative stuff. I hope the second half of the show we can maybe do the negative stuff this first half and then swing it around some more positive things. But let's continue to look at that. What are some of your other more relevant and fascinating cases that we need to put on the table here?
Well, as we're talking about the whole reptilian and the hybrids, I know there's been a book brought out by Dr. Jacobs again saying that the hybrids are here to take over the planet, I think in essence or whatever. And I need to say something here. A recent book out by Barbara Lamb and Miguel Mendoca, who is a UK writer, is the 8 cases he has, and 2 of those I know well because I actually referred one of them to him. Their story is completely different to that, and many they're involved in wanting to heal, help humanity evolve. But one of the fascinating cases that I did a regression with, Charmaine, in the book, when I was in the UK, I did several regressions with her, and what she said was extremely interesting. Where she said, for her understanding of the reptilians that she was with, that they were all part of us, understanding one another. But she said the military did take some of her genetic material and create reptilians for their super soldier program. So, and these, she said, she met her daughters, 2 daughters. She knew they were genetically related to her, and they were her daughters that they created. And these are the program life forms we're talking about, reptilians and greys, that are created underground by the different military factions and whatever. And these are literally used for that darker program that Dr. Jacobs really is talking about, I believe. And these are, isn't it interesting that it's our own species that seem to have the darker agenda, in this instance, certainly, to create fear and to create beings, super beings or super soldiers, which, can only have one purpose. And it's certainly not a loving, caring, unconditional one. So, I sort of see this, and with what is being put out by Dr. Jacobs personally, as more of the MyLab, just as the most traumatized with experiences that have had MyLab experiences. They're the ones that literally are the most traumatized of all. And this is human orchestration of abductions, pretend abductions, false abductions, conning people into believing the ETs are all evil. And this is the program, this is the propaganda, and this is part of the intimidation and fear program and disinformation that's out there. That's what I'm seeing at this point in time.
What I've encountered with talking to my whistleblowers about the super soldier program is there appears to be an agenda of beings that are coming in to, perhaps just rape, pillage, plunder, and wipe out our planet. And that the part of this agenda with the super soldiers is to train our people to go in and defend the Earth and our colonies and, the solar system from the attack of these other creatures which have no consciousness whatsoever. They just come in. In fact, we recently, one of the whistleblowers just died on December 5th, and I did get his story, and he said he was stationed outside Mars, and the beings on this big craft, it was like a Battlestar Galactica, they had lost the ability to even slap another person. They had no violence in whatsoever. And so when he was recruited he was part of the U.S. military, and he was recruited to go on board that secret space program craft, which was many different species working in harmony, and one was blue skin, but the variations in skin tones from pink and white and black and brown, and they're just all variations in colors that humanoids can come in. So anyway, at one point he had to demonstrate what it was like to hit, so they said, punch this guy. He said, what? So he ended up punching a guy, and they said, kill this person, and he killed him. He showed them that he had the ability to kill or punch. And anyway, that apparently is what they're doing, is using some of these people for defense from these planet killers. They come and destroy an entire planet, taking everything of any value and just leaving it desolate, all life. Sasha has a question.
Well, it's just that it's not just the reptilians and that have sides that are kind of competing with each other. Randy Kramer has been telling us about how there was a special branch of the Marines that President Carter authorized to rein in the out-of-range secret military and intelligence services that were totally subverting everything. And so there were splits within the clandestine military itself.
Back to you, Mary.
Absolutely. I found the recent interview, presentation, it's a 4-hour presentation if people are up for it, from Dr. Stephen Greer, in terms of all the whistleblower material that he's collated over a number of years, and the different programs and how he understands it. And as I say, he is very clear that the interstellar beings visiting us are all benevolent. He's very clear on that, and he really states quite categorically that all the negative stuff is primarily surfacing from our own species that are trying to create this whole Star Wars scenario of fear, etc., etc. So he's on this other side of the scale, and certainly some of the material he's come out with does resonate with what I'm hearing and what I've come across up to date. But again, you know, the hardest thing for us as researchers is we don't know what the military know. We don't know what kind of data they've gleaned, etc., etc., because we're fed such a mix of truth and disinformation and what have you. So I go back to the children as my primary source in many ways, and they are aware that this planet is controlled by those shadow governments and corporations and drug companies. They know it's going on. They know that children are being programmed, as this 9-year-old told me. You go to schools and the star children are programmed out of their light, is the way she put it. And she said there's at least 50% of those on the planet now are star seeds. But she said only about 20% retain that integrity, that understanding that they need to bring change to this planet and what have you. And they said, and us poor kids, you know, we've chosen to volunteer, and it's very hard down here because we're attacked from every level, and that we know that they are. We know that they're being dumbed down by, again, whoever is, whether or not it's humans, human consciousness, or whether it's human consciousness being controlled by self-serving extraterrestrials. It may be a mix of both, for all we know, because we just don't know. We can only go on what we sense and what we feel. But either way that you look at it, you know, these children are a threat. And the reason that they're a threat is they're bringing in this incredible amount of information to us and abilities that are really taking us into a whole new level of human evolution in terms of their awareness. They're aware of what's going on. That's the brilliant thing. They can see beyond the lies, and they have a discernment, a higher discernment. Just like that 9-year-old said to me, he was prepared to talk to me because of my frequency. That sort of tells you something, you know, about these children. So, you know, in that sense, I think we've come here to finally be charged, if you like, within our soul journey, to trust that inner awareness, that inner knowing, that heart self that is saying, now listen to yourself, listen to that resonance, and let that be the guide, because in the end, that's the only thing we've got.
Well, I think that's awesome that they have 20% that are retaining. I think it was probably higher. I don't think this is just a recent phenomenon that these star children are coming in, but perhaps we're having a breakthrough, maybe because of the work of the previous generations, that now 20% are remembering, and it'll probably get higher because they're upping their programs to try to stifle them. I think that's why they are taking them at a young age. But I was talking like Cynthia Crawford. She was rejected from the program. She's a hybrid, and she has this huge amount of recollection. So sometimes these people are rejected from their programs, but they come through and they remember so much, and you know, they're getting the word out. I also wanted to just add about what Stephen Greer said. I was at a council meeting with 100,000 unique individual species. There was only one representative of each species. They were all bipedal with some kind of a face and eyes and opposing thumb to fingers and you know, 2 legs. And they were telling me as I assembled, and I was kind of reporting to them the State of the Union, what it was like to be a human, a female, et cetera, and they were saying to me, it was all telepathic. We don't communicate using language at all, so that's not a problem. It's all understood, and you get whole concepts at one time. And I understood that this was only a small, tiny representation of all the species that are sentient and conscious in the universe. So I tend to agree with Stephen Greer, because I've had mostly wonderful experiences with extraterrestrials. I'll be 62 on February 6th. I only had one that I perceived as negative with reptilians, and when I looked back at it, it was really not a negative experience. It's just that their form of telepathy felt very intense, and I thought when I was communicating with them that they were trying to suck my soul out of my third eye chakra. But in hindsight, I eventually learned how to manage that, and I realized they were just talking, but they use a different vibratory frequency.
I think that's very fascinating, and Janet, thank you for sharing that. To me, I always go back to the whole essence of the soul journey, and choosing to incarnate on a planet to experience however the soul wishes to experience, with being human to start with, and to perhaps have a job to do, as so many of them do, and we've chosen to live in a duality where we're dealing with understanding what love is, unconditional love is, and what the lack of love is, and how that leads into fear. So we've got to have the drama. We've got to have the virtual reality of having those that are loving and not so loving, so we can experience both. So from that perspective, there's no good or bad. It's experience. It's learning. It's learning to grow. So when I get caught up with this, sometimes I go back to that baseline and say, you know what? This is teaching me about love, about non-judgment, about knowing that there's so little I understand of every experience that I have, because I'm seeing just a very small part of the whole of what that experience is. So, for some that's not good enough, or they're not ready to go there or whatever. But for me, in the meantime, I think it's the challenge to know that I've got to reflect from myself, at least, the mandate of that unconditional love that we are looking for from these beings that are interacting with us, and perhaps a part of our soul family, or our star family, as it were. And you're quite right, Janet, about I think that the starseeds have been coming in for a long, long time. When I was in Scandinavia, I did Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. I mean, it was 3 countries in 3 weeks. It was pretty intense. But I remember the one important thing about Scandinavia that really disturbed me, and that was how close they are to all the ET interactions and contact. And in fact, I had to see it for myself in terms of talking to various individuals with contact in all those countries, and they said it's almost more acceptable to be a sexual predator than it is to be an experiencer. Oh, and when this is a very, civilized country. These are civilized countries, in many ways very advanced in many ways, but very left-brained in their mindset. And when I was in Norway and I did my presentation, Triggers of Consciousness, I was a bit concerned that maybe it would not resonate with those within the audience, because it was, look, I'm not just saying this is, I'm not even going to pretend this is not real. I am telling you it is real. And this is why I believe it's real. And, there was no question. And I brought in the languages, I brought the artwork, and I thought I really was quite apprehensive of how it was going to be received. After the presentation, there were several people in tears, and one lady came up to me and she said, I'm 80 years old. And she said, you have just spoken about a list of qualities that I've never heard from anyone else before, and I'm 80 years old. And she said, and all of them are me, including the fact that I communicate with animals. And she said, I'm a farmer's wife, and I used to call in the sheep with my mind, and nobody knew how I did it. And she said, I understand, and the validation that it gave her. And she said, maybe I just came in too early. And I said, I suspect you came in as one of those to prepare the way for all these new ones coming in. So I said, I'm sure you came in at exactly the right time. But I felt in some way I'd gone specifically for that lady, because of her reaction, and for those others, because it plainly shows me that they are ready to hear this, but there is huge fear there of judgment and of their sanity. Because when I was in Stockholm, and it was only a small group there, a 28-year-old man came up to me, wonderful young soul, and he said to me, Mary, I started to speak the star languages amongst my friends, and they called the police, and I ended up in hospital.
Right. Well, that is a big fear.
Well, one suspects a cultural reaction formation, and that there's been uncanny experiences by many in the populace, and they're denying it because it's so real and scary for them, and they haven't come to grips with the parts of themselves that actually do contact extra phenomenal experiences.
Absolutely. But isn't it interesting that you've got some countries like South America, as I was speaking to AJ Javard, and in Denmark, we were both speaking in Copenhagen at the Exopolitics there with Pia Knudsen, and he said, Mary, your stuff because I'm speaking in Brazil in July, in Brasilia, and he said, your stuff, he said, will go down without any problem whatsoever, he said, because for them it's just, this is everyday life. He said, they'll love it, and they will be very, very receptive to it. So there you go. Different countries, different psyche, different awareness, different conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so you brought up a very important thing, the triggers of consciousness. Can you elaborate more on what are these triggers that people are having that awaken them? Like, I forget who you mentioned. Go ahead.
Because I've got that kind of fascination and curiosity. You're looking at patterns of experience and how different people are woken up to the greater reality or their multidimensional selves. And I call the UFO kind of abduction contact, although I don't believe, I believe that all true experiences with ETs has a consensual part to it from a soul level at least. But I call that the shamanic, modern day shamanic wake-up call. So some of us, I believe, need to, in a shaman, to be a shaman, you have to face your human fears. So before you can become able to operate in a multidimensional reality and experience, all the different beings, interdimensional beings, etc., etc. So this is really the same thing. It's having a trigger like an experience of going up on a craft, seeing those beings. I just call it the modern day wake-up call from the modern shaman, to be the modern shaman. But with all of that, many people will wake up to their experiences through a near-death experience, for example. Or they may wake up to it through a very powerful grief experience, or an illness, maybe another wake-up call for somebody else. One of the fascinating things too, and this is, having not being judgmental here. It's really judgment stops us from learning so much, doesn't it? When I was speaking in Oxford University, it was about extraterrestrial life against. I had two gentlemen that I was speaking with. One of them was an astrophysicist from head of astrophysics, I think, at Manchester University, and he talked about, the possibilities of life elsewhere, and it was 00 something or other. This was about 10 years ago or whatever. So basically nada. And then another gentleman talking about evolution and basically saying, the same thing. Well, we were all given half an hour, and I just went with witness testimony. I showed the patterns, and I kept it very scientific. After the presentation, I actually won the forum, which I still find quite fascinating. But the bottom line was a young man came up to me, and he said to me, I have a friend, he said, who took magic mushrooms and saw grey beings. Was that genetic memory, or was he really seeing them? And I said, I suspect he was actually seeing them. And we know that various things like ayahuasca and those types of that bring, where you've got the DMT activating the pineal gland. I think that is another way, and it certainly has been the way for some people, where they've started to see the ETs. And there's absolutely no judgment from my point in that. I think the soul journey, we pick different ways to wake up, and for some of us it's trying this way or having this happen, and for others it may be something else. We all have our own journey through this matrix. And so this is another way that the shamanic, through these different types. I mean, we know that many indigenous tribes, this is part of their initiation, is
Right.
to use these different substances to wake up and activate the pineal or whatever, or a kundalini awakening, for example, that some people spontaneously have. These are all ways we get woken up, including, of course, seeing UFOs. And for many people, when they get in touch with me, they'll say, oh, I saw a UFO. And one of my questions is, did you feel differently afterwards? Not just that, oh, wow, I've seen a UFO, but knowing that often there's a download, or often there's been more going on than they thought. They thought they might have seen something for a couple of minutes. We know how they can stretch time. They know that they can pick people up and put them back and they won't have any awareness. But if they're different afterwards, and then I send them a questionnaire, and then it's interesting how many then look at the questionnaire and say, oh my goodness, I've been experiencing this. And I said, yeah. And now they're letting you know it's time for you to start getting to know them. and you know, this is sort of them showing themselves to say, come on, now wake up. It's time for you to smell the roses and realize that you're connected to us. And many say to me before they go out and get a sighting that they've got a feeling to just go outside. And I said, yep, because that's them saying, come on, you want to see some proof now. I know you need it to believe this is real. So here we go. We're going to show ourselves, and we'll take it from there. So, you know, and that's also going with all the orbs that people are taking in, you know, in their photographs. And that is fascinating in itself, is you know, the orb phenomena. I've got a lot of data on that. But the other thing is, what else wakes us up? The frequencies coming from the star languages, the light languages, for example. The frequencies coming from the symbols that some children actually write the symbols on their body. And I've seen pictures of parents, photographs of children that have written symbols and said to their parents, this is important. So we've got the symbols, we've got the scripts, the unusual writing. We've got also the artwork that so many are sending to me from different beings, but also complex, multidimensional images that they say just flow through them. And when you know you have a 7-year-old, and this blew me away because I talk a lot about Tracy Taylor's artwork and others that have similar types of artwork that they're bringing through. This mother wrote to me and said that without any front loading, she's an American lady, and she said, my 7-year-old and my 4-year-old, I wanted them to just look at the artwork and see what they thought about it. And this was Tracy Taylor's artwork. And it was the artworks that she showed them initially were ancient future, evolutionary creation, and possibilities. And both of them said that they're from the aliens. Oh. And then what was fascinating is her 7-year-old said, well, actually, he said it like this. There are different types. The other pictures contain information about aliens. One is about the 7 who will be coming. There are eagle people and cat lion people, and they have ancient messages. And they will land. That's where they'll land and arrive. He talked about the pyramids in her drawings and said they're also teleportation machines. The big pyramid isn't the only one. There are others. They will come at the pyramids and then fly over the ground to the South Pole, shoot up to the North Pole by way of a teleporter, and then fly down to the pyramids again. And she said he made hand motions that indicated the craft would teleport or pass through the center of the earth from pole to pole. And the mother said to him, when you say others, do you mean other pyramids? Her son, who's 7, said, I mean other teleport places on every continent, places all over the world. And she said, so there are other teleportation places other than the big pyramid, the Pyramid of Khufu. Yes, in the side of a hill, lots of hills, hundreds of them around the world. It's actually a place where the aliens do science there. She said, I stopped asking questions. I needed to digest it. He was starting to scare me. Her 7-year-old son has dyslexia, and he says he sees the information in his mind.
Is there a correlation between these types of things like dyslexia, and you mentioned Asperger's, and is there some kind of correlation between these children that have these so-called defects that they're actually have a benefit to help them communicate with extraterrestrials or make contact?
Absolutely. I feel now that I've got enough data to say that with such certainty, and this is what the New Human book will be covering, because I've got 2 scientists. One of them is Dr. Lena Olson, who's got a PhD in molecular toxicology and biochemistry, etc., etc. And she calls them letter people. And she is one. That's Asperger's, ADHD. But she was saying that also certain types of autism, as well as dyslexia, are the new programs. And she said she doesn't believe they're broken genes, but offering a new multidimensional skills to prevent limited reprogramming of a third dimensional reality. She says it's not so simple as foreign DNA. It's a combination of genetically improved bodies in combination with souls from different places in our universe, incarnating in improved bodies. The souls have different frequencies and vibrations depending on their evolutionary status that plays a role in activation of the DNA in that particular body. And she said, I also believe we have to take into account the collective soul of Homo sapiens. She said that they have different body makeup and nervous systems. She said it's an upgraded nervous system. She said in her case, she has more nerve ends for pressure in her skin. She can see more colors and differences between shades of color, acute sense of smell and taste, and acute hearing, sensitive to frequencies of all kinds, even radioactive radiation, energy fields, and energy beaming out of angry people or animals, as well as love and happiness. And she said, and we have to learn to control our own energy field to be less prone to being ill, because we can and use our self-healing abilities. And that's her understanding of herself. And these new programs, which I have always felt there was a reason why experiencers who were being helped by ETs were having children that supposedly had dysfunctions, such as ADD or Asperger's or dyslexia or certain types of autism, which they found with some of the autistic children now, many of them are telepathic, for example, and there is serious research going on with that as well.
Yeah, they're finding a genetic connection between autism and these extreme genius children. So there's something definitely going on with that. We're coming up. We have like 5 more minutes. I wanted to revisit something briefly about the multidimensional aspect of these contact and the shamanic work and Kundalini awakening and like mushrooms and DMT and etc. Dr. Lesson here and John Mack both studied with Stanislav Grof, who does the holotropic breath work. And if you know the history of holotropic breath work, it started with Stan in the mental hospitals in Czechoslovakia, and they gave him, which one, LSD? 25. And everybody in the hospital was required to take it, both the patients and the staff and the nurses, to have a better understanding of this multi-dimensional. Anyway, in that research, they often encounter extraterrestrials. So there's a huge history going back to the 50s of encountering extraterrestrials using sacred medicines, I want to call them. The entheogens, it's a class of entheogens. You want to address that for a second or say something, Sash? You're not talking about
it. It's just, however you experience or symbol your experience, your symbols are valid for the person experiencing them. And it's very important not to diss somebody's way of expressing him. Ray Hernandez talks about having a phenomenon in his living room where his wife is seeing a manifestation of angels and the Virgin Mary, and he's seeing orbs and extraterrestrials. That is, the same people looking at the same phenomenon take it in differently, and it's very important to just take the symbol system, I think, that a person's presenting and use it within its own right, instead of trying to dissect it in some kind of silly objective form.
I absolutely agree with you, and I participated with ACERN in 2000 with Simon Harvey Wilson on a thesis, the comparisons between shamanism and abductions, and they used some of my clients from ACERN at the Edith Cowan University, and what he discovered was the parallels between shamanism and abductions, including healing abilities, telepathic abilities, greater awareness, etc., all the things that the shaman experiences were paralleled by those having these experiences experiences. But I too believe that we have to take note of what these different types of sacred medicine can offer us in terms of understanding the matrix, or the what we call the quantum universe, because I think they've got some valuable things to teach us about reality and how we perceive it and how we understand it.
Yeah, some of the most startling things that we found is that people can actually experience photosynthesis within their own bodies. They can empathize so strongly with creatures that they don't even know about. For example, one's a lady lion and she feels her hunger in the back of her neck, or a whale, and they're holding up their babies. And these are people that didn't get this information any other way, but they get it experientially. And I've just seen the most amazing consciousness expansions on people using entheogens. It's quite amazing.
And so have I. I've talked to a number of them that have, whether it's been ayahuasca or magic mushrooms or whatever, and it has changed them profoundly for the better. They say that even with those that have had depression or those that have had various addictions, they can be cured by this experience, because it opens them up to far more understanding of themselves, their reality, and who they are, and their soul journey. So although it may not be for everyone, I think those that are drawn to these different ways of understanding themselves from that other level, certainly it can be absolutely profound.
And one of the things that Stan showed is that we are profoundly influenced by the stages of gestation and birthing, and that these set a basic perinatal matrices through which all our experiences are filtered.
Okay, that's our music. Great. Back. Yes.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Janet Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and our guest, mary-rodwell. But before we get back to our show, I just want to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on freedomslips.com and make your donation of $1, $5, $15, $20, whatever you can spare is greatly appreciated, and we do appreciate your donation, which allows Revolution Radio to bring you shows like ours and all the other great shows on Revolution Radio. And let's see, Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring Mary back on for part 2?
Okay, so what we've done is the vision that Mary is giving us is one that takes all the paranormal experiences that people have been suppressing or repressing, and allows us to realize that we've been suffering from pluralistic ignorance, that many, many, many people have had profound experiences with apparent other, and we're realizing a kinship, a oneness, a unity, so that underneath the separation that's tearing us apart is the possibility of the unity that we can also feel, and we can enjoy the differences and also enjoy the oneness we have with the other.
So, Mary, I wanted to ask you, and then we can go into whatever you want to cover, but I have a question. Are you finding that people are becoming aware of their multidimensional selves, and that they may have simultaneous existences on many planets and many life forms, many dimensions or vibratory frequencies? I found some of it. I wondered if you'd encountered that as well in your research.
Absolutely. What has fascinated me is when I've heard adults speak about even going up on the craft and their soul essence moving into another container or form, life form, for a task that they've got on the craft, for example. And I remember many years ago being told by a young lady that when she was on the craft that she was a scientist and that she would be in a grey humanoid body as a scientist. And I said to her, "Where's your human body?" And she sort of pointed to, "Oh, it's over there, like it's, waiting for me." And then I said, "Well, how do you get back?" And she described this ball of light leaving the grey form and reanimating a human form. And what's fascinating now is that, I've heard many others describe similar things where they'll go into another form which may be part of their star family for a job to do when they go up on the craft. The 8-year-old that told me when he goes onto the spacecraft, sometimes he evaporates, as he calls it, into his mantid form, which is a mantid being, which he says are his family. You take that one step more, and then there are others that have said to me they are aware of having other lives in other universes, other dimensions, parallel universes, etc., existing all now, and they will explain what it's like there, what they're doing there, etc. Now, we can look at that from one of two ways, that the soul splits into various splits into animating various life forms for various experiences, which they bring back to the oversoul, for want of a better word, or that the soul is literally taking no notice of linear time at all, and everything is existing now, which many people have the belief that that's exactly what is going on, and we can tap into that the more aware, more multidimensionally aware that we are. I mean, one of the fascinating things for me too was when I was speaking to a lady who initially it seemed quite a dark experience for her, where she felt she'd got these implants in her body, and she described what they were for. And we did this regression where she was able to shift those herself through understanding them. And she said that they'd been put there by 3 beings. And I said, well, where was the origin of that? And she went back to a concentration camp where, and this is highlighted in my book Awakening, where she said, well, actually it was agreement that I had with them that I would in this next life have these implants because they helped me out when I was in this concentration camp. It was about 2 years later when I said to her, is that still your understanding, that this is how the implants that were holding you back were in place? And she said, well, actually, Mary, she said it wasn't. She said it was in Egypt, and I was the one that actually orchestrated it all. So she was really saying that her soul self had worked out what she would need to experience in 2 other lifetimes at least, how she was going to experience it and how she was going to understand it. So, this really does take us into anyone who wants to be a victim. I'm sorry, I really struggle with that these days.
I agree. I struggle with the victim. And so I love this example you have. What do you want to say?
Well, it's just you could take this a step further, perhaps, and say that other people, the illusion that people are other than you, can also be transcended, like when you love someone and feel your oneness with them, and that feeling of empathy that an extraterrestrial or paranormal experience gives you is really something that you could apply to everything that you perceive as being not you as really being you also.
Absolutely. If we take it to, we know that with a lot of these different, awakening medicines, if you like, that what they're really doing is giving us sense of our connection to everything, that we are literally, as a consciousness, we're interacting with everything around us, no matter what form it takes, whether it's a more solid form. And I've got this lovely little clip of a 5-year-old boy. His mother gave me permission to, I've got the video of it as well, and he's really got a meteorite, and he's talking about his connection to the meteorite. He said, when I put my finger on this little meteorite, it tells me where it's from, it tells me what it likes, it tells me where it landed, and how it doesn't like people being afraid of it, and whatever. And his mother says, well, how do you know that? And he says, well, it tells me in my mind. Now, here is a 5-year-old quite naturally connecting to the consciousness of what appears to us to be a very solid item, but actually apparently has a consciousness. But again, if everything's energy, if we take it back to the very nature of everything is energy, and everything actually, we're all actually energy, that's all just in different frequencies. Why can't it have a consciousness? Why can't it be sentient in some way? I mean, that's the bottom line, really, isn't it?
Yeah, Lovelock has said, the planet has a consciousness, and the solar system has a consciousness. It has all the everything that you would say is a consciousness. So,
the journey down the rabbit hole gets curiouser and curiouser, as they say in Alice in Wonderland.
Well, the other thing you mentioned earlier was a Kundalini awakening, and so can you explain to our listeners a little bit more about Kundalini and its purpose in awakening people to higher levels of consciousness?
Well, I'm certainly no expert. I'm very good at knowing a little bit about everything, but not a great deal in detail about everything. But my understanding is that we have at the base of our spine a energy or a consciousness that can awaken us on many different levels, and that when we reach a certain frequency or a certain time where we are ready as a soul to awaken, this acts, and they often have it in the form of a little snake that actually works its way up the spinal cord and to the crown, and with that energy it literally acts a little bit like perhaps some of these things like ayahuasca or whatever, in the sense that it can literally move you from a 3D world into a multidimensional world. And for some people it can be very destabilizing for a long time if they don't have anyone to help them understand why they're seeing and perceiving things from that multidimensional level. And often they do end up in psychiatric hospitals, for example, if they have that and they've got no one to explain it. When you're starting to tap in to the matrix, to consciousness, when you're seeing things and experiencing things from those profound levels where perhaps what other people are thinking, or you can tap into it, where you're aware of every part of yourself from that kind of level. And so to manage it, you need the right people. And I think Stanislav Grof was one of the most amazing pioneers there, because he understood this was a spiritual emergence, just as actually depression can be. That really is the part of the soul that has become to a point where it no longer can make sense of what's going on in its world, and there is this deep sadness within someone. And it's really through that sadness, if you can utilize what that's showing you, it can actually be a catalyst for awakening into your true self. And many people have awakened to their spiritual world and making sense of it through a very serious depression or whatever. Again, so much of this is not understood in the way that it needs to be through traditional psychology. And that's my biggest problem with it, even though I'm working within the field, is, and I know that many psychologists and psychiatrists that are aware agree as well, even if they don't come out with it publicly, is because, they know that there is more to our reality than traditional or conventional psychology is saying. And what we're doing with some of our most aware in the planet, we're dosing them with antipsychotics, and we're sticking them in hospitals instead of actually supporting that emergence of that greater awareness and that consciousness shift that they're experiencing.
That was perfect, Mary. Dr. Lesson and I, before we became, simultaneously, we started out as Tantra teachers and yoga. Dr. Lesson's a yoga master, besides being a researcher and a therapist like you are. So I had a Kundalini awakening before I met Dr. Lesson, and so nothing like a good Kundalini awakening to make you go in there and try to figure out what it is. And I understand if I would have said the wrong thing to the wrong person, that they probably would have put me in some kind of Looney Tunes place. And that is a powerful way to connect with the extraterrestrial. We use that purposely in our practice to open the stargates and open handling frequencies and have communications with extraterrestrials. So if people want to have contact with extraterrestrials, you might want to look into these practices which will help you awaken your Kundalini. And I know, Sasha, you can speak to your own awakening. You did it, you had your Kundalini awakening when you were just doing yoga one time.
Oh, all the time.
Now it's awakened, though. It's like a wave. So that's another way for people to make contact with extraterrestrials.
Well, I would say that, it's very interesting to think of yourself as having a social self, that a protective self that makes sure you don't get locked up or ridiculed or punished in some way. And you can also, if you get permission of that social self, to let yourself, to your own self at least, know about parts of you that may be contacting extraterrestrial or interdimensional or other paranormal entities or experiences, and to know by your witnessing whether it's safe or not to keep it private, or whether you can share it. And what we're finding is more and more it's safe to share it, that there's this huge pluralistic ignorance of millions and millions of people who are having these experiences. When we start revealing them, even anonymously, and talking about them, we get a much bigger picture of the elephant of reality and its multidimensionality, I think.
Yes, I agree. And this is why I think it's so important now, even if someone doesn't feel safe in giving their identity, just the mere fact of sharing how it has been for them. And really, primarily, that's my role, I feel, with the presentations that I do, is that what I feel like if I can at least put this information out there, no matter how strange some people may find it to be, ultimately those that need to see it will resonate with it and think, oh, thank goodness, that's not just me. I remember profoundly being affected by a gentleman who actually phoned me, and he was in his late 50s, and he said, I've had some strange things happen in my life. And I said, well, I'll send you a questionnaire and you can look at that and tell me if any of it makes sense to you or resonates with you or whatever. Within 24 hours, he rang me up and he was in tears. And he said, how do you know about my life? And that was his response. He said, everything that's there, he said, is what I've experienced. How do you know this? And I said, well, I only know it because I've had many wonderful, courageous people prepared to share that side of themselves, and it's allowed me to put something together that, are the patterns of this. And he was totally shocked because he thought all his life, he'd gone 60 years with thinking there was something wrong with him. And he's not unusual. We all know there are so many that feel exactly the same way. They cannot believe others are experiencing what they're experiencing, primarily because This is not acceptable in the 3D world. You cannot talk about this. You can't go and, even whether it's your GP or whatever, because if they're uninformed, they are going to see this as some kind of psychosis or whatever. And this is what, I am so passionate about all of this, and why I put it out there is because of that, is because we've got to start to help those out there that are afraid to say, you know what, this is the truth, this is what's going on, and you're not crazy, and it's okay. Even if you never want to share it with anyone, at least know that you're okay. If we can start that off, and I think the work that you're doing is amazing. I think, the fact that you're so open with your experiences, this gives so many people courage to actually come out and say, this is my experience. And one other one that I will say has also profoundly affected why I do these radio shows particularly is the actual subject matter was, you've saved my life. And I looked at this email thinking, well, that's a pretty strong statement for anyone to make. And this beautiful young woman said to me, I was literally about to take my own life. And she said, and then I sat and I was listening to this radio show, and you were speaking on it about the new children and, the people, the star seeds and what have you. And I realized that this was me. And you've actually shown me now why I feel so different, why I feel so alienated on this planet, why it makes no sense to me. And he says, and thanks to you now, he said, I'm going to actually hang around and see what my mission is. Wow. So I've never forgotten that. I've never forgotten it, and this is why I make sure that I do as much of this as I can, because if one person's listening that this helps, then it's been worth it.
Right on. I agree.
The more you let yourself talk about the experience, the more it unfolds, and the more details you remember, and the greater depth you have. Michael Lee Hill calls it, you become an integrated experiencer, so that you don't have to repress or forget anything. You can remember it all. You can just systematically keep it private or suppress it when it's in your interest to do so.
So where are the safe places for people to express themselves? I know that there are more networks available. Can you tell us a little bit more about the resources for our listeners who might be having experiences? Where can they go?
Well, I think there's a number of wonderful organizations out there with different mandates and what have you, but I can only speak, about in depth about the two that I'm involved with at the moment, which is my own Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, which has been going on now for 16, 17 years. And that one is, although it's based in Australia, I do have contacts globally with many different individuals. So if you're from another country, and I do get those from, Europe and also Asia, as well as South America, et cetera, what I try and do is when I do get contacts of therapeutic help in those different countries, then I will refer people to those, because of the language problems and this kind of thing. So that's one of the things that I can do even with ACERN, but also with the new organization, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Extraterrestrial Research. What we're hoping to do is have the languages available, all the languages available globally, with all the surveys that we're doing, and also connecting then through this to all these different countries. That's the big mandate with Free, is that we want to have, representatives in every country that can offer resources and support in those countries as well. So that's the aim, and that's the focus. I do have lots of contacts in America, and there are lots of different starseed organizations where you can share, as well as Facebook and this kind of thing. And I've got a Facebook page which really is primarily for allowing people to share anonymously, or if they choose to have their identity. In some ways it doesn't matter whether they want to share or not share their name, because really it's the information that matters, it's the story that matters. And them sharing that. And I absolutely agree with you there, Sasha, that, by listening to other stories and other accounts, and I know some people don't like to do this in a way they feel it may in some way bias their own material or their own experience. I disagree totally. I believe the more you hear different stories, the more it triggers more awareness of your own story, because they may say something that you've dismissed as not being important, whereas they'll say it and you'll think, oh yes. And I notice that very much when I do experiencer workshops. The primary reason for them is so that with hearing other stories, they get triggered into remembering, because that's how it works, and because they've all got a frequency. They're actually working with each other's frequency. There is a trade going on, and I'm going to get very weird and wonderful here, and I say the trade is often codes. It's energetic information that's within their energy fields as well. So there's a great deal more going on in Experiencer Workshop than maybe some people are consciously aware of. We are trading on numerous levels, including vocally as well. So they're very important, and also my other primary objective of those kinds of workshops is that people connect and at least have some people close to them or in their locality that they can share with, because they can't always, get in touch with someone like myself or yourselves or whatever, but they can at least with a friend who's having similar things go on and say, last night this is what went on, or, I woke up feeling like this, and what do you think? Or just having someone, because the husband or the wife may not be as open or as able to support as they would like, or their family may not be as open or as aware. And I also have, and so does Free, peer support in Free, so that if you want a buddy or you want someone who understands, who's had experiences, then I can connect you to our coordinator, Lynn Hartram, who will connect you to others either in your locality or whatever, so that you can have someone to share with, someone who understands, who's been, who's had similar experiences to you. And this, the most important thing is to feel not alone and isolated, and to know you're okay. And that then you can start growing and interacting on a deeper level with those that you're connected to. Because ultimately, when people come to me and they're looking for answers, and I do hypnosis, and we may get some wonderful information that helps them, I say, now you know what? It's time you started talking to them too. And when you don't understand something, how about you go and sit in a quiet place, a place where you feel very peaceful. Make sure there's no one going to interrupt you. Just ask some questions in your mind about what you'd like to know, and wait and see what comes, because you may be quite surprised. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about here, Janet and Sasha.
Yes, indeed. Perfect.
Sasha has a comment.
Just that you mentioned dreams, and I don't want to just skip over that, because your dreams, not just the dreams you have at night, but also your waking fantasies, can give you loads and loads of information if you just allow the characters in the dream and the objects in the dream to have voices and communicate with you. You'll find very interesting things, and to have someone each day that you say, you know what I dreamed today, here's what I dreamed. Things will come to you.
Right, you'll recognize patterns, and you invite your subconscious to communicate with your conscious self and start remembering. So that's important. I use the journal system. I have a journal by my bedside, and I write my earliest thoughts and feelings and emotions, and often as I start writing, I start getting the downloads and remembering that was just a surface memory. There was much more underneath it. I wanted to address the assistance, the help that's available. There's no real organization to train therapists to work with experiencers formally, and I noticed that a lot of even traditional, perhaps hypnotherapists, they don't know what to do when suddenly their client starts talking about ETs, and they may direct them away from their experiences and dismiss it. And that's a danger. When you go to do therapy, you might get invalidated, and that can cause more harm than good. So I wondered if you're working at Free to connect people who want to learn how to do the regression therapy with experiencers to somewhere where they can have that training, get that training.
It's a very important one, Janet, and you've really hit the nail on the head there. And I've been asked several times usually on a one-to-one, by various therapists working in the field to say, can you head me or give me some guidance in terms of how to work with experiencers. Some of them may have done, regression work with past lives, for example, but as you know, there's something very uniquely different in working with, the whole experiencer phenomena because of screen memories and all this kind of thing. They need to be aware of that. So it certainly Free is looking at that as part of the mandate, and I think it's actually very, very important to start to share that kind of understanding, because again, it is a learning exercise to go from past lives, and I did a lot of that previously. I feel like in some ways I was dumped in at the deep end with all of this, so I can only assume that on some level, I always feel that you don't get the clients coming to you until you're ready and they're ready. So on that sense, I trust the universe with that one. But I do think, a certain training or understanding of things to look out for and to things to be aware of, I think is extremely important. And I actually believe it's important to do this work, to be more, if you can, to enhance your own multidimensional skills, so that you're not just coming from the left brain 3D psychology world with it either. You've got to look at your own intuition, your own awareness, the fact that you can connect and get insights to help you work with someone as well. That is extremely useful, I've discovered, because as you know, that you can get wonderful guidance just by opening to the fact that as you're working with someone, you may just get a sense of something or a feeling which way to go, or an awareness of how to go, and to trust that as is that guidance to, okay, in regression, for example, I may be, I've got the list of information or questions that my client may be looking for in terms of their understanding. But I also know that in that journey, I need to connect with any kind of support I may have. I call it my non-physical team, that I may just get this knowing or this sense that this is the way to go with this particular question, or this is what I need to ask for that one. So, I'm asking those, and in training I would teach people, how to listen to that other part of themselves, which is guiding them, in that therapeutic process. Because I know many counselors are actually highly sensitive, highly, intuitive, but they don't always know whether to trust and validate that feeling or that sense or that knowing, which is all our multidimensional self actually giving us information to help us understand our 3D world and our multidimensional world as well.
It sounds, I was just getting, while you were saying all this, it seems like there's a need to have a book on how to train therapists and what to look for, especially groups. I've encountered, I've been to many different discussion groups, or what do you call it, experiencer groups, and sometimes there's some things that are disturbing that happen where, the groups get hijacked by disinformation agents, that's the best way I can put it, and training even the group leaders, if somebody's doing their own support group in a city or town somewhere, what to do, how you deal with these people that are coming in and are disruptive. I don't know if you've encountered that in any of your groups, but I've noticed that in some recent trolls. The trolls are coming into our support groups.
Well, Jana, one of the ones that did rather stand out, and I remember not saying something very nice in my mind when it happened, and it was during it was a small experiencer group, and normally I do take people at the very end of the experience workshop into an altered state to seek some answers and understanding through visualizations and what have you, which is part of my stock in trade. And out of the blue, what was interesting in that group was actually there was a minister of religion, believe it or not, who was an experiencer, as well as another lady who was highly religious, and this may be the reason this came in. But one of the ladies went into a slight trance state and she said that she was, and in came this energy that said it was the Antichrist.
Oh, wow.
And I remember thinking, you know what, I really don't need this today. You know what I mean? It was like, do me a favor, guys, I mean, of all of them. And it started coming out with some highly controversial information, and it was using fear to start with, and then it tried to use flattery and a few other things. And luckily, I had 3 years training with my multi-dimension, if you like, with those kinds of abilities. So it was very clear. I got some very clear ways to deal with that, and basically sent it on its way. And the lady came back, and it was saying she wouldn't come back, and there was basically, and I said, well, oh yes, she is, and we had this little kind of battle, this intuitive battle or psychic battle, if you like, where I was absolutely clear. But my biggest concern was there was a wonderful little lassie who was a teenager there, and she was absolutely terrified, and I was really quite pissed off with this particular energy for upsetting this little 17-year-old that was having a really good time and opening up and what have you, and messing up the whole energy of the. But we cleared it, and there are some people I feel that need to be very careful how they open up, because if you are in a fear place of any kind, or you've got huge issues, you can pull in some of these unhealthy energies, if you like, and you have to be aware of that. And that's one of the things you need to understand working multidimensionally. And I know, Janet, you will understand this, and so so you will, Sasha, as well.
Well, we've been doing groups for 50 years, and it's like we've learned to have the interdimensional demonic forces exercised, or the bouncer that takes that person into the next room, so they don't disturb the energy of the group that's building. And we don't always have that in place, but it would be nice when these groups are. It would be nice to have a lot of people trained in doing these groups. So if we have these types of incidences, because yes, it is disturbing to the 17-year-old who's having a wonderful experience, and all of a sudden she's dealing with these dark demonic forces, and we don't really want to shut them down. And that kind of what happened in this group is like all of a sudden we had this dark energy that was attacking everybody the moment they said anything, and it wasn't even following the rules of the group, which was a brief sharing and then pass it on. It just like total hijacking. And so I thought there might be a handbook or a training or some writing up these stories, how to handle these situations.
Well, actually, Bill Baldwin has a very fine book, Spirit Releasement, and what he has people do, and I've seen it work, and I use it myself sometimes, is if Satan appears, I just say, I get him to look inside and see that he too is of the light, and he won't disappear. And I ask, depending on the person's particular ideology, I might ask the Archangel Michael to cast a net of light around Satan and all his associates that go through my client, and all my clients' friends and networks, and go to their appointed place in the light and have a dialogue with them first a little before I send them off. So you can there is a great book. It's by Bill Baldwin. It's called Spirit Releasement Therapy.
I think it's very useful to put in some of these other examples. I do know that what was interesting, this workshop was held at a lady's home who was actually a social worker. And she said to me afterwards, Mary, I'm really glad you dealt with that, she said, because I wouldn't have a clue. And I said, well, I'm very grateful for my training, which was to help me. I did everything from remote healing to connecting, and working on different levels of trance or whatever. So I understood the process, I understood how it worked, and I understood how to manage it. And I think we all have the ability to do that. We all have the ability to understand and work on that level, but many people, due to their beliefs of one kind or another, are maybe afraid of it, or they think that, if they open up, then something terrible is going to happen to them. And we all know that those that are having encounters are intuitive. They're, psychic, I don't like the word psychic really. I mean, we're all psychic. We're all intuitive. We're all multidimensional. We're all able to do all of this. We can all ride the bike. How we ride it depends on how much we focus on, honing our skills, if you like. But we can all do this. We all sense and feel and know and have intuition, etc., etc. It's just that many people, particularly if they've been very heavily programmed in, the left brain 3D world, struggle to overcome that conditioning, to let go enough to allow that side of themselves to tap into the matrix and give them the information that they need. But it is there, it's waiting, and it's available. We just have to know how it works. And I always say it's very simple. With the left brain, you think first before you speak. With the right brain, multidimensional self, you speak before you think. And it's the complete reverse of the coin, if you like. And from that, I start to show them how it's done. And it's, and it actually is so simple once people get it.
Wow. So we have, about 25 minutes or so. I'd like to focus on some of the good stories and the hope for this planet and our universe. And even if we are in a Star Wars type of society here in the solar system or the galaxy, that there is some way that we are not victims and we can empower ourselves and turn this paradigm around. One of my earliest encounters was on a ship, and I was shown 24 different multiverses, and they were all variations on the theme, starting with the most destructive, where the planet blew up, and ending with several utopian realities. And I was given the choice, where do I want to be? So I was shown very early in this incarnation that I am the chooser and that there are no victims. How can we concretize that for our listeners and for this planet, that we truly are not victims, and that we have powers and abilities to bring about the utopian reality that we would all like to see? We know it's possible. We've seen it in movies and we've fantasized about it. But, one of the things that people say, well, that's impossible. So how can we instill that possibility within the people of this planet and our listeners?
I think you're doing it, and all those that are doing these kinds of sharing of information and experiences, all of that is going into the consciousness of the planet. I still, the whole 100th monkey type scenario where we need maybe 10% of the planet to get it and then everybody gets it. We know there's a shift, that we know because more and more people are becoming more aware, more and more people are awakening, and sometimes these people are awakening from, very left-brained worlds or 3D worlds through some experience or other that they have, and it's happening to all levels of society as well. We know that it's not just the children, and the young adults. We've got those, the older generations now realizing or waking up to a whole new world of possibilities through their experiences. And you mentioned Ray Hernandez, who's a good friend of mine. There he was, a lawyer. Didn't really have any major beliefs in anything. His wife was Catholic until this huge mothercraft went over the house, and this energy being came down and healed his dog, who was very, very sick and was due to die. And from that time, his whole reality changed. And he really did struggle for several months to several years, really, to come to terms with this experience. And it really did knock him sideways. And I do find the scientific mind really struggles with letting go of the old programming and what have you. But whether we like it or not, though, everybody's getting these frequencies. Everybody's getting and picking up on this if they are on some level ready for it. So every time somebody wakes up, more of the frequencies go out, energetically, as well as, from, the fact that we're talking about it, that we're making it okay. And we are making it okay by every time that we write about this or whatever. I'd like to read this from a 12-year-old when he talked about where we were headed. And his father actually is an engineer in Texas. And I'm calling the boy Peter. And Peter apparently told his father, "Humanity's been at this point 3 times, but we have been knocked off course. This time there's a 95% chance we will make it, and possibly 100% chance that we are headed to a higher level." So that is from a 12-year-old saying we're very close to achieving the objective this time. And I find that quite a hopeful and important message to say to people. And I see it before me. I see people that a few years ago, you couldn't mention even the word energy to them because they would roll their eyes. And now are not only talking about energy, talking about different experiences and whatever. And through doing things like this, we're giving people permission to own the elephants in the room. And, I get lots of professionals, and some of those within the religious fraternity. I've been speaking to a wonderful minister in England, Anglican minister in England, that's right into crop circles now, and talks about this little star kid she's been talking to, that talks about past lives and what have you. And they're the fact that this is a minister that contacted me, that's telling me about a star seed and how, the way that they're looking now at the whole religious from a different perspective, etc., etc. And that's the religious fraternity. Mm-hmm. And then you get the therapeutic fraternity that are contacting me. Excuse me, I just need a quick drink here.
Go ahead.
So these are different, parts of our society that people look to, are seeking help from, either spiritually or psychologically or physically in some way. And all of them are, we're getting people within those fields. A lot of nurses come to me, so many nurses. And I'm not surprised because it's a healing field. Right. Some of them are psychiatric nurses that are telling me their experiences. And one psychiatric nurse said that she's going to write a book on a new way to look at mental health, because she said it's crazy the way we're treating people who are supposedly mentally ill, who are just clairvoyant or clairaudient or whatever. So we've got this, if you like, level of awareness within all sections of society that are waking up, and I believe it's all about timing, that when the time comes, and many talk about their mission, what is it? I get very anxious because I feel I should be getting on with it or whatever. And I usually say to them, don't you think the soul knows where it's going? It's, it's not going to let you miss the bus. As far as I'm concerned, when you need to know, your soul is going to make sure of it. Even if it has to, put you in the corner of the room and make you listen. One way or another, it's going to make you listen. Otherwise, why would it bother to bring you down here in the first place? So, that's the way that, and a lot of this is trust too, trusting the soul journey and trusting that we will know what we need to know and we will do what we need to do when the time comes. And the awakening is going to be different for every one of us depending on who we are and our role in society, etc., etc. But I am very hopeful and very excited about what this future for this planet, I believe, will be.
Me too. And I'm excited about your book coming up called The New Human. Can you tell us what that is about and when that'll be out?
I think a lot of us are older models of the new human, if you like. So it will be relevant for those older as well as the teenagers and the children that I'm talking about. But the reason that I'm writing it with the focus of the teenagers and the children is because I feel that they've been less conditioned, less programmed, and so their information, I believe, has a clarity. And the fact that it's coming from young children, some of them as young as 3, 4, or 5 to 7 or 8, when I've got 7-year-old girls, 2 7-year-old girls and one from Melbourne, actually, that were writing about going to space schools to Mars and being taught things on Mars in these spacecraft with children that weren't quite human, and also what they were learning. And the corroboration that I was getting from these 7-year-old girls that didn't know one another but were saying similar things about what they learned on the craft, what they saw on Mars, the domes on Mars and the beings on Mars, and even some of the strange, if you like, kinds of writing and script that they were seeing. When you get this information from 7-year-olds that don't know one another and are saying similar things, you have to start saying now, where is that coming from? Can we easily continue to dismiss this kind of information when it can be extremely profound? And when they're concepts that are way beyond normal children, what I call normal children of that age. I know I've got grandchildren of that age myself. I know what normal conversation is, and when these children talk about their star families or their space, their friends, as they call them, they might call them their friends that come and visit them and show them things and teach them how to levitate, as one 9-year-old, no, sorry, she was only 7, talking about where she went to learn to meditate near Pluto, and the reason for Pluto was because the gravity was less, and it made it easier for her to learn how to levitate things because of the difference in gravity. Now, you don't get 7-year-olds explaining it like that. These are the things that I will be writing about. I will be writing about what the children, not only the way they talk about these things, but also some of the profound concepts that they mention, including, some of the conspiratorial stuff that they understand, how they know that they're being shut down. And I will leave it to the reader to read these accounts and to make up their own mind whether or not that resonates with them, but also about how these new kids are coming in. The ADHD, as Neil Gold, who was diagnosed with ADHD in later years, actually changes the name to always dialed into higher dimensions, which is another lovely way of saying they're different and they are dialed into a different reality, and that's why they don't cope so well on this planet and get so bored. It's actually really, really logical, A lot of this, I think, is absolutely logical. You've got to have new programs on this planet, haven't you? Because if you're too easily programmed into the mindset, how on earth do you shift that programming to get into a greater awareness, unless you have a Kundalini experience, or unless you have other experiences like that that shift you into understanding there is a greater reality. So that's sort of a long way round, really saying how I see it all happening.
I was looking for your video to listen to before the show, a couple hours ago, and I happened upon a video of a young woman who had a long name of somebody's name of facial distortions. And I looked at her and I watched her talk, and I said, she's a hybrid, and some doctor has labeled that such and such disease or genetic disorder, but she was obviously a gray human hybrid, and that's what she looked like. And so I wonder how many disorders or diseases are labeled something, and it's just the medical field or scientists trying to explain something, which is this hybridization process.
I think you're absolutely right. And what is, it's part of the mandate, I think, is this whole discrimination against the visual image, and we judge every book by its cover with our limited understanding of what's going on. We don't really listen and feel and sense that person. We just think, they're either dressed inappropriately, or they're acting in a different way to me, or I don't like the way they've done, they put their makeup on or whatever. I think this is teaching us not to discriminate and not to judge the book by its cover, but to feel and sense the beautiful soul that's behind that image that may have chosen these particular ways of being to challenge us, to get us to see beyond the obvious 3D experience and what have you. And also with those conditions, I read a book called, it was about a young girl who had autism, and it's called A Child of Eternity. And this little girl was 8 before her mother realized that she wasn't mentally subnormal, if you like, that disadvantaged, if you like, and because she thought she could never communicate with her, she seemed completely unreasonable, until she learned a computer program that helped her daughter to communicate with her. And this daughter, suddenly she's finding her daughter's not only intelligent, but she's extremely intelligent. Through the computer, she was able to see that her daughter was keen to learn, was very sad that she couldn't communicate with her mother. And then she came out with something really extraordinary. She said, you've got to start talking to your spirit guide, Sebastian, because he's been waiting for you to meditate. And her mother's completely and utterly gobsmacked by this information from her daughter. And she said, I chose to be autistic. And her mother said, well, why would you choose to be autistic and have these disadvantages? She said, Well, she said, when I was in utero, I limited the nutrients in my body so that I would be born autistic, because I needed to go within and I had to learn to live within my inner world. And this is why I am autistic. And it was a revelation to her mother. Remember, this is a young child that was able finally to explain her soul journey and why she had that particular, those, what we call physical dysfunctions, because it was part of her soul journey to be that way.
Wow, amazing. Disclosure. What does that look like to you? How do you think it will happen? 50 years from now, or even 20 years from now, we look back in these days. What are we going to think about what life was like for these poor people here before disclosure?
Oh, look, I think that they're drip feeding us all the time, and I think you've just got to see beyond, the screens that they put up. I don't think we're going to get anyone, certainly not from America anyway, standing up and saying, the aliens are here and we've been using their technology for 50, 60, 70 years and you really didn't need oil and gas, and, you've been ripped off, basically, left, right and centre by corporations and et cetera, because there's too many people that are going to have their necks on the line. But I do think there's a drip feeding going on, and I also think that it's going to have to come from us, and maybe from some other countries that may be less worried about the reactions to it. And it could be China, it could be even Russia perhaps, and some of these other countries that may just say, we've had enough of this, it's going to come out. So it may be all of that, in the sense that there may be some countries like South America, for example, is very, very open. Many of those countries, and Mexico is, for example. But ultimately, I think it's going to come from us. I think we as a species stand up. You know what? Fed up of all the nonsense. This is my experience. So having maybe an experience today, which we're looking at as well as being a day where those that are ready to know what. That's my experience. So I think the ground as well. Same with all those other different prejudices you had with gay people. We had people that couldn't come out and speak about these things. We've got to come out of the space closet, and it's up to us. I think we've come to do that, and I think the Star Kids, and we're all part of the Starseed program. It's up to us. This is what you're doing, isn't it? Absolutely doing it. This is what we're doing now.
I just want to, sorry to interrupt you, but we're having really a lot of interference, so John's going to try to reconnect you so we can finish the show here. So just hang on. We're getting horrible interference. One moment and we'll have Mary back. What would you like to say, Dr. Lesson, while Sean's reconnecting?
Well, the thing is about having these intuitive children, people that know the truth, and what disclosure about the extraterrestrial paranormal experience will take the cap off of is disclosure about the mass murders that are perpetrated by the people that are running this planet, who play us against each other and addict us to their terrible drugs and wars. And that's the great fear of those in power about what disclosure. It's not just about the extraterrestrial presence and the wonderful gifts of energy and teleportation and medicine that they can give us, but it's the fear of them having to face the mass murders that they perpetrate on this planet and the terrible things they do to children right here in this very age.
Mary, can you speak to see if we've got...
Yes, I hear you far more clearly now. And what I'd like to say, Sasha, I absolutely agree, because corruption is all being exposed now from many, many different levels. And I agree that it isn't just, disclosure of this is, they're here, but it's all the other things that have been covered up in the programs that have been conning mankind in terms of how we're controlled and what's been done to humanity by humans. And I think they're very afraid of that. And that's why I think it'll be up to us to stand up and say, you know what, this is real. And, this is what you're doing. And this is what I'm doing. And this is what hundreds of thousands of people now are doing. In the end, that's what's going to change the mindset.
We just got a report of a fellow, and they're investigating this to see if it's authentic, but he was taken, and his cell phone was on and recorded 45 minutes of the extraterrestrials and inside the ship. So we're trying to verify that it's not CGI and fake, but when I listened to the soundtrack on it, it was very familiar, because I am a contactee. I've had tons of communication with Greys. And I don't know if that's the first one. If we get something like that, have you ever heard of anybody getting any films or pictures of the ETs during one of these contact or abduction experiences?
There is a case in England that I learnt about last year where they said that they felt they'd got some pictures of the inside of the craft, but there's been no more of that, so I don't know its veracity, although it was coming from a credible source. Maybe now this is another way they're letting us, put the information out there, is with more and more of the tangible, physical, photographic evidence. So I'll be really interested to hear what else you find about that, Janet. That would be brilliant.
Well, we're investigating it, so I will report once I can kind of verify it a little bit more. I don't like to just put everything out there without somebody checking it out, and I'm certainly not a CGI expert. We have about 4 minutes. What would you like to make sure that our listeners hear from you, Mary, in the 4 minutes we have left?
Oh, look, all I'd like to say is I know it's a difficult time, and I know that many starseeds are very sad and anxious or depressed at the moment because they're feeling the energies of the planet, they're feeling the chaos, they're feeling the sadness and the pain. And I would just ask them to hang in there, because they've come for a reason, and they've come to help change that, and it will change. And it's just a matter of hanging in there till things start to move. And if anything, it is hard, but just to connect and support each other in the meantime, because they've come, and they've all come, as you and I think have come to make a difference. And I think now we're getting very close to doing that.
Where are you going to be presenting? I would love to have you back in the States somehow, but I don't have the money to fly you, but I'm working on it. Where are you going to be in the next 2016?
I'm speaking at an Afterlife conference at the end of January, but I'm also speaking in Melbourne and Sydney, but also Brasilia in July for AJ Javard and his it's the 4th contactee forum, and it's being held in July. I did have an invite also from the US, but like yourself, they haven't got the money to fly me over. It's a MUFON conference in Phoenix, but if I get enough together, there's always a chance that will manifest. I leave it to the universe to work it all out, and some more local conferences that I'm doing, conscious living conferences and this kind of thing. So I want to finish the book next year if I can, so I'm trying not to be too busy.
Right. Well, we can't wait to see it. So 2016 is your book year. Dr. Lesson has another book, and I have another book. And we have 2 minutes to the close. So you said earlier that your website is down. Did you ever get the link? You have a Facebook page. How do people find your Facebook? Is it a secure page?
I will send it to you as well, but it's obviously www.facebook.com/ACERN, which is ACERN.com.au. So, but I will also post that out as well, and I'll send it to you, Janet, just so you've got it as well.
Excellent. I will put that in the page I made for you. And if people want to do a session, or they want to just contact you, do you have an email for them?
Yes, it's the one I always have, which is lowercase, the word starline, STARLINE, at iinet, that's 2 I's, so it's iinet.net.au.
Net.au. Okay, and we have 1 minute. Any last words?
just a big thank you to you both for inviting me again and for sharing your understanding and for doing what you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so
too,
much.
Mary. It's always a pleasure. And much love and blessings and aloha to everyone.
Aloha.